Good evening, and welcome to the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan's 2023 week series on future of work. We do this in collaboration with the Kent District Library. I'm Michael Vendetta, and I'm the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan. On behalf of my colleagues, Erica Kubik and Emily Smith, and the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan, thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for adjusting with us as we program responsibly in this time of COVID-19. And we hope that all of you are well and stay safe and show grace to those in your community. The Council's mission is to empower the people and organizations of Western Michigan to engage thoughtfully with the world. We do this through the help of 50 local businesses and 11 colleges and universities and numerous community partners such as KDL. Together, we seek to provide programming that is credible, that is objective, that is relevant, civil, and compelling. To change the world, we believe you first have to know the world. You can learn more about what we do at worldmichigan.org. Now I'd like to welcome my co-host Randy Goebel, the Director of Engagement of KDL, and he'll share some words from KDL before I introduce our speaker. Randy?
Thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody to this Future of Work series. We're very proud to be partnering with the World Affairs Council in this series. And about 4 weeks ago, when we were facing this shutdown of sorts, the topic came up about what we should do with this program, because a lot of topics you can reschedule, push out into the future, but this topic seems to be very timely, and we thought we really need to do this. So thank you for everybody for pulling together to make this happen, and thank you to everybody who's joining us on the call. It's been a dramatic shift for us as an organization too. We have 350 employees and about 140,000 patrons that we serve. And it's just been a real test of everybody's agility, but we've been able to shift pretty rapidly in what we do. All of our people are working from home, and it's an interesting shift because we're such a high touch, personalized organization in what we do to go to online services, but it's been working very, very well. And that comes a lot from the passion of the people at Kent District Library. It's really a wonderful organization. We've also been growing some of our resources in the topic of work resources, workforce development. We've added many different databases and online resources. You can find them online at our website, but some of them are like soft skills development. But we've also added a career online high school program, which is a certified high school diploma for adults to complete if they haven't completed a high school graduation. This is different from a GED. It's a certified high school diploma program. And this has been made possible through the support of a lot of generous donors to Kent District Library. And it's a totally online program that people complete very rapidly. And it's personalized to where you're at and what you need to accomplish. We've also been hosting small business expos, which have been very successful. And there's just a wealth of things that we'd like to offer to you. So at any time, please visit kdl.org, check it out, and we'd love to help you and look forward to seeing you at our branches.
Thanks so much, Randy. Appreciate it and appreciate this partnership. And we're pleased to have Kristin Sharp with us and are grateful to her for her flexibility to engage us in this format. Kristin Sharp is a partner with Entangled Studios. It's headquartered in San Francisco, and it's focused on building out the future of work and workers and technology projects at New America, examining the impact of automation and AI on the workforce. Kristin co-founded the Shift Commission that did all of that work, and she does her work right out of Washington, D.C. Earlier in her career, she had a long stint in the Technology, Innovation, and National Security Policy for the U.S. Senate, working with senior staff in roles, senior staff roles for senators and committees on both sides of the political aisle. Kristin is a Grand Rapids native with a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and a master's from Duke University. And after her comments this evening or presentation, there'll be ample time for questions. You may type them into our YouTube comments section, or you can text them to 616-308-6560. Please exhibit civility to our guest and hospitality to others by asking respectful and succinct questions. Kristin Sharp's presentation tonight is titled Global Trends Shaping the Future of Work. We welcome Kristin Sharp.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. And thank you to your team, Erica Kubik and Emily Smith, as well as to the Kent District Library and Randy Goebel for welcoming me here tonight. I very much appreciate the leadership of the World Affairs Council in putting together this series of discussions. There's nothing more important than the workforce and being able to appropriately connect people to work that is profitable, meaningful, and something, and having to do with skills that are necessary in today's world. So in addition to loving talking about the topic, as a Grand Rapids native, I'm really pleased to be back in the world of talking to Michiganders and Grand Rapidians about the topic. Please, in advance, I want to apologize for not knowing totally how to do this format, despite working in technology and despite doing a lot with virtual and Zoom related things. I think we've all learned a lot about how to make things remote and virtual over the last little while. And so there may be some technical glitches or things that we troubleshoot as we go. And I appreciate everybody's patience, as well as attention in participating in this discussion and using a Tuesday evening as a time to get new information, think about new things, and have a conversation about how the workforce is changing in light of automation, artificial intelligence, technology, remote work, and all of the other things that we're experiencing right now. So first and foremost, very big thanks to all of you for putting this together. So in order to share my screen, I'll get going. Okay. Looks like it's working. Okay, I got a thumbs up. So as Michael said, I am a partner at the innovation and strategy firm Entangled. Entangled Group is a consultancy and investment firm that looks at the ecosystem of education and technology, and in particular, thinking about new ways to connect workers, educators, learners, and employers into being able to have conversations with one another about what's happening today, how to close the skills gap, and how to identify who will be good at what kind of job and what kinds of jobs are on the upswing today. As Michael said, my own background is long in connecting communities with the kind of economic development that they are seeing, the job growth that they're seeing in their own regions, and in creating partnerships between education institutions and career-connected learning, and so that students and educators are tailoring their pathway and navigating a pathway into things that are growth opportunities and growth jobs in today's world. So the goals of our discussion today are, one, to better understand the global trends that's affecting the workforce, and two, to identify what that means for the kinds of jobs that are on an upward trajectory. So the workforce today is changing, and changing dramatically. Some jobs are going away entirely, and others are changing rapidly as a result of different kinds of technologies. We see that both in the trends of how technology is facilitating and enabling work. We see it in the kinds of work that people do. We see it in the kinds of occupations that our education system is training people for. And we see it in the ways that the rise and waning of different kinds of jobs. One of the major contributors to changing jobs right now is new technologies of all kinds. It's enabling people to work remotely. It's enabling people to work virtually. It's growing the importance of data and connectedness into being able to aggregate big systems. And the things that enable us to process all of that data generally have to do with machine learning, artificial intelligence, and automated systems in some way. So before we go into what that looks like for different kinds of jobs, I generally like to engage the audience in a little bit of logical guesswork from your own lives. So I will give everyone maybe 30 seconds to see if they have a pen and paper handy. And since I haven't done this virtually, hopefully it's showing up the way it's supposed to on the screen. But take your pen and pencil and write on the piece of paper a grid going from automation resilient kinds of work to automation risky kinds of work. And when we talk about that, in engaging people in discussion, I generally talk about the kinds of things that make something automatable versus something that requires human interaction, curation, or engagement in making a decision about workforce things. And some of the things that relate to automation, basically what automation is defined by a few things. First, a task is repetitive. You do the same kind of task over and over again. Second, it's rote. It's something that you do from memory rather than having to learn it anew every time you do something. And thirdly, it's routine, meaning you can perform the task out of habit rather than having to sort of adapt as you go to it. So with those in mind as the kinds of criteria that make something automatable, a task or a role that is repetitive, rote, and routine, look at the jobs on the left and see if you can put them in order from most resistant to automation to riskiest as a result of automation. And Michael and Randy, I'm watching you in terms of figuring out what the timing is on this. So one of the things that particularly right now is most resilient to automation, most able to resist the forces of automation, most able to stay relevant, even in a world where lots of things are, lots of tasks are being performed by technology, is IT administrators. Now that can incorporate anything from cybersecurity to software systems analytics to the people that vet the tech vendors that a company is using. And those kinds of jobs are becoming ever more relevant in lots of different ways, partly because the technology itself is relevant and constantly changing, but also partly because there's an element of creative problem solving in using the technology in different ways that requires somebody who is an expert and requires a sort of a human interaction with the information and the technology. Next is PR managers or managers in general. This example is a PR manager because it's thinking about the ways that you interact with different stakeholders in a situation. But project managers in general are often quite resilient to automation because it requires so much guesswork and on-the-job troubleshooting of different things. Next, lawyers, which as professional services, people often guess that high-paying professional jobs are not automation risky or are not prone to being automated in different ways, but things like the legal profession, accountants, even some kinds of medicine that analyze big swaths of data, discovery in law, for instance, often can be automated by big systems that can take a lot of data input and evaluate it and analyze it quickly. Executive assistants are something that historically has required a lot of discretion and historically has required knowing the principle that you're working with pretty extensively, but that function has recently been taken over in lots of different ways by technologies, sort of based on Siri, but things that are systems that can adapt and plan meetings from Google Calendar and from Outlook Calendar in different ways. So that's becoming a function that in many ways technology can replace more than was true before. And then finally, cashiers, which even before the COVID-19 situation was something that was at quite high risk of automation. And we're seeing now both sort of the combination of social changes as a result of disease protection and all of the good and necessary precautions that we're all taking, combining with the fact that that function is a pretty rote, repetitive function to start out with. We'll do this one quicker because this is the same kind of idea, but you can also rank skills from least risky to most risky. So let's have everybody very quickly take a second and see if you can organize the kinds of skills that aren't necessarily specific to a certain kind of job, but might be skills applicable or not applicable in lots of different contexts. So to go through that one quickly, system level thinking, which is the interaction between different parts of an organization or interaction between different parts of an ecosystem. In the education world, it's thinking about how do you both attract a student to a particular degree or certification type of course and pay for it, and think about the kinds of broadband or connectivity that enables the student to be successful. It's thinking about all of the different parts that go into something. Tends to be one of the most automation resilient skills that a worker can have. Secondly, being able to look at a set of resources and appropriately allocate the time, money, budget, and attention required. Service orientation, this is an interesting one because we're seeing service jobs tailor off in lots of different ways, but the things that are much more specialized kinds of sales or service, curating a particular piece of information or demonstrating the use of something, that tends to be resilient. So that shows up about halfway through the scale. Reading comprehension was one that surprised me, seemingly something that everybody should have, but that because we can so quickly recall information through the internet and systems where we look things up quickly, it becomes less relevant in a job context because you're always with a situation where you can ask someone, check in with the system, get the information ready at your fingertips. And finally, physical tasks tend to be the most risky to automation. The kinds of roles that are stable, emerging, and declining as a result of these things are just some examples that highlight some of the things that we've been talking about. The kinds of things, I'll start with redundant and won't go through all of these, but just to pick out a couple, big swath educations or big swath occupations, things where we have a lot of people that do the same kind of thing and they input the same kind of information over and over again, such as accountants and auditors. Those things tend to be things that are either going away or adapting to other ways of doing the job right now. We talked about cashiers, we talked about telemarketers, things related to services that are provided on a routine basis. The new roles, the things that are emerging over and over again, tend to be things that are connected to new processes of looking at data, new pieces of technology, such as software or applications of software, different kinds of app design and development, and ways of distributing either through the supply chain or e-commerce or different kinds of ways of selling, promoting, and talking about new products is a type of role that's coming up over and over again, because people need to be able to curate and make the case for why something's important. So the question that I get generally on this is, why is the workforce changing right now? And there are several major forces, many of which we've talked about and can continue to talk about, but that are changing both the way society is organized right now and the kinds of jobs that are emerging. First, automation and AI are dramatically shifting different kinds of jobs. We've talked a lot about why that is, what kinds of things are changing, and the trajectory of the technology jobs that those things enable. The second major factor that comes up both across the United States and worldwide is jobs are increasingly requiring specialization. And that can be true in any occupation or category of work. It's true in manufacturing. It's no longer do you just need to know the assembly line itself. You also need to know 3D manufacturing, or the way that manufacturing is specific to your industry. It's true in healthcare that it isn't just sort of being a nurse, but a nurse that is specific to a kind of practice area or specific to a technology, interpreting the technology and the diagnostics in different ways. We're seeing it in terms of even entrepreneurialism and people starting new kinds of businesses. The specialization and the ability to identify and make the case for why your service or product is different tends to be the thing that attracts clients and attracts customers. The third trend that we see repeatedly and over again is how critical digital skills are, even to jobs that we don't think of as digital. We don't think of things that are sort of an engineering in the mining industry or basic art design as things that require digital skills. But one of the biggest trends that we see right now is the content knowledge coupled with digital skills, or what I call and jobs, where someone has an existing area of expertise and then they add digital skills. That tends to be something that gives people a leg up and connecting to jobs in different ways. And then finally, something that we were seeing as a trend even before the COVID-19 situation and are seeing even more now is workplace dynamics becoming increasingly remote. Whereas the trend before this was that most workplaces had a process for working remotely in special circumstances. You know, your child has a dentist appointment, you're sick for the day, things like that. We're now seeing increasing numbers of employers have real policies in place for people working in a remote or distributed way permanently, or at least for long periods of time. I joke that in my own job, like I live in Washington, D.C. and work for a company that's based in San Francisco. So certainly was doing a lot of remote virtual work even before this situation. And then the second question that I get a lot from people is why we're seeing these changes compound right now. There's always been change in jobs. There's always been churn in industries. Why are we seeing it come to a head at this particular moment in history? And the biggest answer to that question is that we're the different kinds and capabilities of technology are right now converging to the point where they're about to surpass humanity's capabilities. So this is a chart, sort of a joking kind of chart, but that shows the capabilities of creatures, shows the capabilities in computing power of a human brain, all human brains, and then machine capability surpassing that. And we are on a trajectory for machine capability to surpass the sort of total capability of humanity in relatively short order. So it's coming up just as machine learning accelerates and as artificial intelligence accelerates, the ability of data to sort of learn from itself and build on itself, it enables more and more kinds of things to be applied in more contexts, and in particular in a work situation. So the other thing that artificial intelligence and automation generates for people a lot is, isn't this only changing jobs at the lower end of the economic spectrum? Isn't it only changing low-wage jobs? And that is not true. While there will be disproportionate impacts on people at the lower end of the income scale, it isn't true that that's the only thing, that's the only category of people that automation and data connectedness will hit. There are lots of different professional levels of jobs that are also at risk in automation. And worldwide, we'll see 1.2 billion people impacted by either changes to their jobs or changes to their industries over the course of the next 10 years. The World Economic Forum estimates that only 1% of countries are fully prepared for the future of work and fully prepared for, as a country and as a system, being able to sort of educate and launch people into appropriate kinds of jobs for the future. And partly that's because of the skills gap. We have 9 million jobs that are expected to be unfilled by 2029. And in part, it's because the lack of matching of the specific skills to the kinds of jobs that are growing. We also see that 61% of the US workforce and about 50% of the international workforce is expected to face some exposure to automation in the next 10 years. That higher education is certainly readying people to be able to be agile thinkers, but not as much as we will need to go as sort of lifelong learning and the need to constantly upskill, reskill, and continuously rethink how your skills fit into the industry you're working in move along. And so 45% of higher ed students demonstrated that they are not able to sort of put the pieces together in a way that would be as beneficial to them after just a few years of college. We've talked about this a little bit, but I just wanted to put a more specific point on the kinds of things that we are seeing grow right now. The latest data that's available tends to be the 2017-2018 timeframe. And as we've talked about, STEM professionals are in high demand. STEM professionals being those that work in technology or mathematics, science, and engineering. Healthcare professionals are also big growth areas in lots of different ways, from doctors and nurses to health aides and technicians. The other thing that comes up frequently is sort of HR and education functions of how will we connect people to the new kinds of jobs? How will we help people navigate their pathways from the existing skills, experiences, and capabilities they have to something that they want to move into? So the second trend that we've been talking about is the increasing specialization. And we see that in lots of different levels of the workforce. We see it in everything from people who used to be HVAC installers moving into solar voltaic or things that are specific to a specific kind of system installation. We see it in occupational therapists rather than sort of traditional medical fields. And in part, the way that employers are dealing with these specializations and the need for more different specific kinds of employers is by using contractors to do specialized work. So we're seeing both an increasing set of specialization in lots of different occupations, and we're seeing that that some employers are working to try to fill those gaps by having people work on sort of a shared contingent or freelance basis. In total, I just like to show sort of the distinction of what the freelance economy looks like as compared to more traditional jobs. Still today, about 5% or so of people freelance on a full-time basis. Many more than that freelance as some part of their income. Probably 25 to 30% or so of people get some income from an outside occupation that isn't their primary or anchor job. And about 75% of freelance workers say that technology platforms make it easier for them to access those kinds of jobs. As we've talked about already, digital skills are becoming the thing that is linking people to new kinds of opportunities. Digital skills, especially combined with the skills that are traditional skills, are those that sort of give people a leg up. And in order to connect people with those kinds of skills, more and more kinds of employees and more age groups and more contexts will require reskilling. Finally, as we talked about, the workplace is becoming increasingly remote, but I want to just go over a little bit about why that is. In the 1990s, broadband and connectivity was still dial-up. You still had to sort of call in, and there was still a very specific distinction between being at work and not being at work. Most people worked from 9 to 5. Most people finished their jobs at the end of the day. As broadband and connectivity enabled more people to work remotely, more people were able to sort of do that on a temporary basis or do it on an emergency basis. And then the advent of smartphones in the early 2010s was the thing that really allowed people to consistently be able to check their work as they went in any context. So the thing that ends up being the question that most people ask is, what kinds of things can we do in order to build up and allow people to be prepared going forward? And 4 things come up over and over again. First is connecting people to both what to do in order to take advantage of some of the freelance capabilities that are out there, either in a temporary basis as you're transitioning to something else, or as a way to permanently augment your work and income. Secondly, allowing people to virtually engage on a regular basis so that they have freedom of movement, freedom to connect in different ways, freedom to sort of think about the ways that they want to use technologies, the digital skills that allow them to analyze the actual information, and the sense of entrepreneurialism of how one gets the skills, uses the skills, demonstrates that you have the skills, and thinks about going forward in a way that sort of presents your skills as the individual in the best possible light. The 3 ways that we see the education system adapting is first, sort of better visibility for students on what kinds of jobs are out there, what kinds of jobs are emerging, what employers are looking for, and how to connect to those things. Secondly, better matching. What are the ways that that students can identify their own skills and assets, identify the things they're predisposed to be good at, and connect with something that's going to inspire them to do something that they legitimately like to do in different contexts. And finally, better connections between all the parts of the education ecosystem, between Randy mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, tech high schools and things that are connecting in at an earlier point, what the visibility into different kinds of jobs are. So how do you make better connections between the high school education system, the community college system, the four-year degree system, the employer system, and all of the workforce supports that connect those things? We're seeing companies and employers try to respond in lots of different ways to those things as well. First, co-creating learning programs with community colleges so that there's a constant back and forth between the kinds of skills gap that employers are seeing and the kinds of things that educators can do to connect students and learners to those skills. Secondly, internally, creating programs within a company, within industry, within a trade, to think about how to give people the digital skills that augment their existing knowledge of the industry or company. And thirdly, thinking about what are the long-term strategies to sort of game out what certain potential factors that change the company or change an education system could be. These adaptations do seem daunting at times because skills aren't always as obvious to learners as they are to the employers that want to have people use them. Jobs change so fast that workers don't know that they're out there yet, so don't know what the possibilities are. Transitions often involve going back to school, going back to a certification program, or thinking about a new way to apply your skills in the context you're already working in. And that kind of movement tends to be foreign to people at times. Companies don't always think about ways to move people around within departments or to have interdisciplinary projects. And finally, employees workers tend to be daunted by the fact that there's so much change out there that it is hard to figure out where to go, hard to figure out the kinds of things that will help you navigate new approaches and skills. And it can feel sometimes like so much is changing so fast that it is impossible to put all the pieces together yourself. So the last thing that I like to do with people is to sort of go through the timeline of the major technologies that have been out there. The first computer was completed in 1943, and it was the size of a warehouse. So you can see the look of what one computer did and how it processed information. In the 1980s, IBM released the first personal computer. In the 2010s, smartphones became prevalent, and in 2030, like it remains to be seen how we'll engage with each other, with technology, and with the things that will allow us to deploy technology in a way that uses human skills newly and differently than we do now. So I think I'll stop there and offer to answer any questions or to sort of think through with the group in your own, in Grand Rapids, in your own workforce, in your own educational background, in the kinds of jobs that you're seeing. Do these trends resonate? What are you seeing in Michigan? And sort of what are the ways that you're most interested in trying to adapt and set people up for success going forward?
Thanks, Kristin. Appreciate it very much. If you could flip your screen back so we can see you a little bit more directly, and we've got some questions for you. We're getting some also from the from our listeners, and that's really cool that they are contributing. And
there we go.
There you are. Great. Here's the first one. This one from this is coming to us from some of our hospital connections at Mercy Health. With the advent of the internet, increased awareness of our global interconnectedness, where does cultural competency or global competency come into play as an essential skill for knowledge?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think that we see it in the ways that people can use their own existing knowledge to solve problems and sort of be adept at empathizing with people in a way that furthers the problem that they're trying to solve. I think cultural competency can be one of the best sort of indicators of agility and soft skills and the ability to communicate with people, because it's something that predisposes you to want to make a human connection and want to show someone how something will work or what it means to them. And that skill is something that I hear over and over again from educational institutions, from employers, from sort of technologists that are developing new things, that none of the stuff works, none of the technology works, none of the jobs go well if there isn't somebody that can be sort of the navigator of it and working with people to demonstrate why a new thing is helpful, why it's something that you want to use, why it's going to further your goal in using it for your work.
Oh, it's great answer. And that question was from Metro Health. I think I said Mercy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Metro Health, and thanks to our partners from there for answering for that question. But with the need for frequent reskilling and the shift to contract labor, how can we create societal response to protect workers?
Yeah, another great question, and one that I think we're working on as from a policy perspective as jobs continue to change. While fragmented work and doing things on a contract basis isn't really a new concept. Like, people have been farming out the janitorial services or the food preparation services for companies that are not related to those fields for a long time. But the ability to do that in a planned and sort of on-demand way is new because of technology. And because of that, I don't think the laws have really caught up, and social norms too haven't really caught up. And so part of the way we do that is by advocating for sort of labor protections and new thinking about how to use freelance workers in some ways. And part of it is educating people about how to make best use of that technology in a way that increases their income, increases their flexibility, does things that are helpful to the worker. So I think you want to act on both sides there.
It was interesting that you made the point that people think that AI means across the board a loss of jobs, just right off the top. And you said, no, that's not true. Certainly some jobs are going to be lost, but there are some that are going to be gained.
Right.
And how can we know about what those jobs are going to be? How can people sort of get ahead of that curve and train themselves to be AI ready for the next jobs that are available?
Yeah, that's a great question, because overall, I do think that AI presents more opportunities than it loses. And we probably, and we're seeing now, because of outside and unusual factors with pandemic disease, that these things are happening faster and people aren't able to pivot and change to things because the economy has contracted so much so quickly that people can't shift around. But I think in the longer term, we'll go back to AI creating new kinds of jobs. And I think that goes back to the earlier point of needing to have both the subject matter skill, your knowledge as a teacher, and also how you use technology to advance that occupation. And so it's the thing that helps people get ahead of it is being able to say, you know, I'm going to understand how the data about learning helps me as a teacher, and then be able to talk to my administration about how we can implement new things. And because of that, you as a worker are able to sort of take initiative, come up with new things, be innovative yourself. And it's that kind of thing that will distinguish all workers going forward. How can you use new information to solve problems in a different way?
That sounds like a promotion of the liberal arts.
Well, in lots of ways, right? I mean, I think both things need to happen. That you know, we hear from liberal arts schools and employers too, that the importance of communication, the importance of being able to pivot, the importance of sort of continuous learning, and the ability to integrate that learning into what you already know is so important. And those are things that you learn from liberal arts, right? But it's also the ability to apply that knowledge and know how to put the pieces together in your own world and your own occupation. That's important. And that is something that I think as an education system and society, we're still figuring out how to teach people, or how to, you know, sort of do that on a systematic basis.
I have a brother who runs a trucking company and is a philosophy major, and he goes, "That's the perfect major because it's solving problems. That's what philosophy is."
You know, weirdly, I have an uncle that is both a truck driver and I think a Russian lit major in college. So, yeah, there different kinds of thinking go together in lots of different ways, and that's becoming more and more true.
Yay for the liberal arts. From the audience, won't leadership skills be extremely important in this position?
Yes, and a great point, and one I should have made more explicit. One of the common themes among all of those things, of data connecting to existing information, of being able to sort of explore and understand new trends as they're coming up in your occupation or your job or your industry, all of those have to do with leadership and thinking about both how you as an individual and how you as a participant in whatever industry you're working in can go forward. And I think that both sort of top-down leadership and also personal leadership are really important there.
Great answer. Yeah. How might rural areas respond to the changing nature of work? Broadband issues, the thought that economic development coalesces in urban areas and the rural areas get left out. How might these regions of the country keep up and be engaged in this change of the workplace too?
Yeah, another really great question, and one that I've struggled with quite a lot lately, because the trends previous to COVID-19 were very much about how people can sort of start businesses that are unique to their area and grow them in different ways. And Grand Rapids is a perfect example in some ways of, you know, Beer City and the cider mills and distilleries and things that people, the sort of tourism and scenic beauty of the place, people have really built up in the last certainly 10 years or so. And that connection of community and things that were happening in your community and unique to your community, restaurants and foodie stuff and the arts and different kinds of things like that had been, and I think probably someday will continue to be, a big trend that rural areas are becoming known for in lots of ways. So that's been one thing. But you know, in terms of staying up with the digital trends and being able to use new technologies in agriculture or in logistics or in some of the kinds of industries and occupations that are associated with rural areas, like though broadband connectivity is key to that. And so I think, you know, as a nation, we need to think about how to make sure that everybody is connected and you know, as quick a connectivity source as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kudos to library systems in that regard. I know the library reaches everybody, and in the rural areas too. It's a key. Libraries are a key resource?
Well, but for a couple of different reasons that really go well with what we've been talking about. One, there's a sense of community and a gathering place where people can get the information they need, meet up with neighbors, sort of exchange ideas and things. Then they're a sort of ready source of broadband and like have access to that stuff. And they're sort of a source of having all of the knowledge resources that you actually need to do it. So in many different ways, that's true.
Yeah, well, yay for libraries. I hope that maybe they can become those hubs of learning, in this new economy too. That's great. That makes sense. Here's a question: how do you think we can promote intellectual diversity in teams? And the respondent said, "I just don't find people talk about diversity in terms of intellect when you're bringing a work team together." And it seems like we're really going to have that in this emerging and changing workforce.
That's an interesting question. I think that kind of goes back to the previous question of leadership. In thinking through what makes a good team, it is critical to think about, one, how to encourage the team to put themselves in somebody else's circumstances. And you can do that in like the kitschy ways of actually assigning personas and forcing somebody to think about something from a different perspective than their own. You can do it from a physical and situational thing of like, you must operate from this place in the office that you don't normally go, or something like that. And you can, sort of purposely talk about the importance of all kinds of diversity, for not just diversity for the sake of diversity, but for the sake of having as much variety and perspective in your outcome, in the development of your service or product that you can get.
Mm-hmm. Well, the last 4 weeks have been incredible. They're just uncharted territory for all of us. What feedback are you getting in your work about how COVID-19 and this like immediate change that companies and schools and other places have had to embrace some of these things? There's a lot. It's a lot of learning as you go. There's been a lot of fun made of that a little bit too. And but what are you hearing in your work on that score?
Yeah, that's a good question too. In the immediate right now term, the biggest question that we get is, how can we try to help match and play the connector role between companies that need to lay off people or furlough people and companies that are hiring them? Can you form a partnership between hotel chains that know they have to furlough people in the next 3 months, and delivery systems that know they have to ramp up the ability to package and deliver stuff fast. So that coupled with how can you, for the workers that are in high demand right now, which are mostly healthcare, logistics, and delivery, how can you make those occupations as safe as possible for people? In the longer term, the question is, how do we rethink education? Like, this is an opportunity for everybody to think about how to partner more closely with the kinds of places that are going to hire people. It's an opportunity to partner, to have more visibility for students, learners, existing workers in sort of what their next step is, and to really be concerted about helping people plan out what their next step is, and giving both the technology and the just like visibility tools to do that. So I think those are sort of the two questions that we get. How can we rethink education right now and make it, make it something that more people have access to in more different kinds of ways? So not just 2-year or 4-year degrees, but also maybe stackable certifications, short-term things that are, 4 sets of 8-week courses that give you, you do one year and then work for a while, then you do one another year and work for a while, and sort of what are the ways that we can rethink the process? And it's giving us an opportunity to do that, both because of digital and remote work, and just because everything's up in the air right now.
Hey, Randy, I'm going to ask Randy to unmute himself there. He's got a great question up there. Let Randy ask you that question. Randy?
Thanks. There's a lot of really great information out there about generational differences, and it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole with each. But what would be your advice to employers to really understand about generational differences, especially as it relates to improving workforce retention?
The biggest thing that I see is that my generation, Gen X and up, it tends to be way more hierarchical and respectful of authority. Than that's just not the way that like millennials and below function. They like millennials and below, big picture, of course, not everyone, but big picture tend to be motivated by the stuff that interests them, and sometimes the stuff that interests them is just, you know, providing for their family or you know, necessity, and sometimes the stuff that motivates them is like a much more highfalutin thing, but it's motivating that younger generation tends to be like how you can structure a project so that it's a win-win, so that it's a value add for the employer or the organization that they're working with, and they're learning a new skill or doing a new thing, that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
It's a good question, though.
Another question from an audience member about where will the education system find teachers for these new dynamics? I think I'm keep in touch with college and university faculty all over the area, and there's, you know, a lot of them scrambling to all of a sudden put all this together. Where are the new teachers going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, we're all struggling with that a little bit, and it's true because the like lecture format doesn't come across as well in virtual as it does in other contexts. And so I've seen it with my own kids homeschooling. Having them just like do a worksheet isn't very helpful. Having them watch something, answer questions in real time with somebody else about it, and actually engage with it, that's a much more useful way to convey the information. So yeah, this question of how to find people who are good at that now and then help them teach everybody else how to do that, that's a great question. Yeah.
One last question here, Kristin. Have you identified strategies that hold promise to reduce the disconnect between the expectations of employers and those of the educational system? It seems that we've got quite a gap there, and we've got some ways to go. What's been some of your observations about that engagement in that?
Yeah, so the number one thing seems to be that employers just work on a faster basis than schools do a lot of times. And so working with both the schools and the employers to turn out faster approaches, even if like what schools like is something that eventually goes into a degree, or that gives the learner a launch point into something else, right? And what employers want is somebody who's coming in with the kinds of skills or the ability to, you know, transition so that they get the kinds of skills that are going to be value add on day one. And so connecting those things tends to be pulling in somebody from the company or industry into a partnership in developing the kinds of projects that you assign to learners as they're learning, so that they're actually like part of the curriculum and part of the delivery system is a project that will benefit the end employer, so that it's connected the whole way through the process, rather than the traditional educational model, which is like learning something and then go apply it, like apply it as you go and then get constant feedback and constant ability to iterate as you go.
Well, Kristin, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a delightful time with you. And can you tell people how they can keep up with you and your work at Entangled, and how, if people are interested more in the subject, want to engage you more in that, how can they do that?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes, if you have questions for me specifically, you can reach me at kristin@entangled.group. I'm also available on Twitter, which I think is KT. I don't actually know that offhand. at KT Sharp 2, or I'm on LinkedIn at Kristin Sharp.
Right, that's great. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks, Randy, for the partnership of KDL. And if you know someone to be interested in this conversation, we will have it archived on our YouTube channel, World Affairs Council Western Michigan. KDL will have references to that too, so you can go back there and find it. And we will be back next week, same time, Tuesday at 6:30 for the second part of our Future of Work series. And we have Spring GR's Ata Obande leading us in a presentation titled Entrepreneur's Experience in the Changing Economy, Local Perspectives. Then 2 weeks, Dr. Bill Pink, who is the president of Grand Rapids Community College, will be with us to talk about educational and employer partnerships. So we're pleased that you were with us tonight. Stay with us again and have a good night.